All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and start. Thank you all for being here on this cozy, cold, dark night. And we can't, nothing is better than listening to poetry during this time. And we're so happy to have Kristina as our featured poet for tonight. And she's gonna dive into her books with us, and we'll get to know more about her as time goes on. But I'll go ahead and introduce her to you all. Kristina Erny is a third culture person who was raised in Seoul and is always homesick for somewhere. She is a poet, a visual artist, a teacher, a wife, a mother, and a foreigner. She has experience facilitating writing workshops with elementary, middle years, and high school students, as well as university and adult groups. Currently, she teaches literature and creative writing to international secondary students in Shanghai, China, hence the bright room she is in, where she lives with her family. She's lived and taught in Indiana, Sierra Leone, Arizona, South Korea, China, and Kentucky. She holds an MFA from the University of Arizona. Her work has also been the recipient of the Ruskin Art Club Poetry Award and the Tupelo Quarterly Inaugural Poetry Prize, and her manuscript, Wax of What's Left, has been a finalist or semifinalist for the Noemi Prize Book Award and the Ashata Sawtooth Poetry Prize, the Colorado Prize for Poetry, Persia Books Lexi Rundinsky Poetry Award, Slope Editions Poetry Prize, Anhinga Robert Dana Poetry Prize, Tupelo Press Dorset Prize, and the New Rivers Press Mini Voices Project Award. Her debut collection of poetry, Elijah Fed by Ravens, was published with Solemn Literary Press in December 2023. Kristina, we're so happy to have you tonight, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome. It is daylight here. It's 9 a.m. in the morning here in Shanghai. This is my third year living here. Prior to moving to Shanghai, I lived in like just outside of Lexington, Kentucky for 4 years. And I was born in Kentucky. So I have deep love and appreciation for Kentucky, and the Kentucky landscape is really embedded in my the image systems of my heart. So I wanted to start by reading some poems that sort of celebrated and I think embody some of that landscape, and also this book, my book Elijah Fed by Ravens, a good chunk of it was written while I was living in Kentucky. So the landscape is really infused in the poems, and what the poems are sort of trying to explore. I also have been thinking a lot about, there's actually quite a lot of apocalypse poems in this book. And I've been thinking about the ways that things are unraveling and seem to be continuing to be unraveling, maybe at an accelerated pace. And I did not watch the inauguration, but it's been really interesting to be an American living abroad, especially in China during this time, all of the fall, and sort of, listening from afar. So anyway, so I'm going to read a few poems that I'm going to start off with a poem that's I consider sort of like a poem for the Anthropocene or a apocalypse poem. Okay. This is called In the Days Before. In the days before the actual end, there were many smaller heartbreaks. Moths ceased their incessant tapping against screen doors. Cows shivered and dropped to their knees. Milk was poured casually down the drain. At the edge of the field, a gyre of common starlings, kudzu like a plastic bag over the forest's face. Once there was a tree so stalwart and wide, a family of 5 circled round and the children slapped its trunk with joy. Under the pavement, there was a field ripe with wildflowers. In the field, foxes instead of vinyl siding. A person used to be able to split through the husk and know there would be seeds. Thank you. So that's just the first apocalypse poem in the book. Okay. This book also interacts with a text from the Old Testament in the Hebrew scriptures. That's about the prophet Elijah and him being sustained in the desert by God. Through these ravens bringing him meat. So a sequence of the poems sort of interact with the text from those kind of scriptures. And in addition, there's a sequence of poems that sort of follows, it's named for the parts of a liturgical mass. So the opening part of the mass is called the Kyrie, and it's like the crying out. Okay. Kyrie. Overhead, the cloud split like a melon. Oh, banged up light. Oh, color leached from please have mercy. Please help us be perfected. See this body winnowed down to wafer, how our tongues reach out. Understand that we live somewhere between hide and seek. Wonder if our crow will ever come. Will we witness it once, or will that be enough? I'll take what I can get. All right, cool. All right, now I'm going to read Apocalypse poem number 2. So this poem is actually an abecedarian, which is a form that's super fun to write if you want to try it. It's essentially each line of the poem starts with the next letter of the alphabet. Anyway, so that's what this one does. Cause. If not Adam, then air conditioning. If not baby scream, then boo-boos, dead bees. If not sunscreened coral, then incubator, cheatgrass, curdled milk. If not clogged ducts, then a dementor or dog poop. If not E. coli, then Easter baskets or eczema or empire. If not friends, then their frenzy. If not gringos, then growth hormones. If not hair with rats' nests, then horses beaten dead. If not imposters, the internet, sharp incisors. If not jackals, then jokesters. If not kudzu, then lack of kindness. If not personal limit, then destruction of liminal space. If not meatloaf, then broken mitosis. If not niceness, then a child's nautical death, thin and never-ending cord of bubbles rising up. If not organ failure, then oregano, origami, false optimism, pustule, permissiveness. Loss of quilt patterns, too many quaaludes. If not reality TV, then risk assessment. If not starlings, then single-syllable response. If not burnt toast, then endless talking. If not umbrella, then umbilical cord. If not varicose, then only one version of events. If not waste, then our want. If not xenophobes, then extravagant spending. If not yesterday, or the lack of the color yellow. If not zealots, then what made us all zeros? Okay. So another thing that sort of happens in this book, I use a form that I invented called a resurrection. So I have poems that I've written in the book, and then poems that I've sort of resurrected into other poems. So the idea of the resurrection is that you can only use the words that were in the original poem to construct your new poem, or the words that were in the original text, whatever you're trying to resurrect. So it sort of turns that thing into a word pool. And so there's several sort of pairs of these, the original poem and then the resurrected poem in the book. So I'll read the original one and then I'll read the resurrected poem. Yeah, kind of like a found poem from your own writing. Very appropriate, yeah. And I want to read this one because my heart has been in Kentucky in a more kind of intense way recently. My grandfather, who's living in Lexington, just passed away this past weekend. And so I've been really, really longing to be home and be with my family that lives in Kentucky right now. And this poem is a little bit of an elegy in some kind of way. So I'm going to read it. So this is for my papa. This is for Paul Rader. What the trees teach us. In the middle and all through the trees, old whirring things, and in the in-between, between their leaves, time pinched up. What falls is not forgotten, only traded for another sun. Who else spoke the language of death from life first? And did anyone see the green thread trail into the dirt, then trellis up as morning glory? And then here's the resurrection. This is called Teach Us, a resurrection of what the trees teach us. Death traded the pinched middle. What old things in leaves? Life in and through anyone else. From first trail, then up, trees who spoke and did see, trellis morning, all glory. In the forgotten language, only sun. Time, trees up between green whirring. What is not another? Dirt as thread between falls. Okay. So the next one I want to read, I'm gonna need just like somebody to give me an indication of the time at some point because I made sort of a playlist, but I'm not really keeping an eye on the time. So okay, thank you. Okay. So I'm gonna read just one or two more from this book, and then I'll transition to reading from my chapbook and a new work that's not published yet. So this is called On the Eve of Our 16th Anniversary. On the eve of our 16th anniversary, we are frothy with longing like we've always been, like a bathtub we stepped out of, stepped back in. Who decides our life? I saw turkey vultures out our window riding the wind a couple of days ago, and I was jealous of them. You know how it is. A season of trees bent over almost in half. Jessamine's wind lipped our chimney, yet they were so still, hovering like paintings of birds. Under them, the field was a countertop. Cows spilled like peppercorns behind paper cutouts of trees. I breathed in and out while their slow, controlled orbit looked like, I could swear under my breath, joy. Over the wind, I could hear nothing but the blackness of buzzards scraping their tender circles against the sky. All right. Okay, and then I'm going to use this next poem sort of as a transition between this work and my chapbook, which includes poems that were written during the first 10 days I lived in China. And so this poem is kind of was written during a time of trying to make a decision about whether or not to move and uproot my family from Kentucky to move to China. It was a very difficult decision. Anyway, you can see some of the like angst in the poem, and it features ravens. It features a lot of Kentucky imagery. So, okay, here it is. This is called A Sign. A sign. 5 crows the size of my torso, feathers like pupils or outer space, shined over a styrofoam Cane's chicken container. Balled up paper napkins, trash cans by the tennis court toppled in yesterday's wind. 5 crows means one for each of us. I didn't see them at first on the hillside, my walk to work. It was early, a winter morning, a sky stippled white, not yet fully light. I had been asking for this, some sign, some gust, some guess at what I should or shouldn't do with my life. The sudden mess of blackbirds. Of course, I counted the birds. I tape takeout cookie fortunes to bulletin boards. I burn incense, consult the sky, watch the way the lake plays its light. I quiz the ditch for what God might be saying. Today, the honey locust had already shook loose almost all of its seeds, and the sky was mostly static. 5 crows hopped together on the grass. Then mine took off, followed by the others, chicken tender in beak, French fry in claw. Ha ha! Ha ha! I'm listening, I yelled. The crows, already far out above the soccer field, disappeared into anonymous blue, having already eaten, having moved on. Thank you. I also want to give a shout out to Carrie Green, who is in the audience, who helped me a lot with many, 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 many of the poems in this book. She's in my Lexington poetry group for the 4 years that I lived in Lexington, and I'm so grateful for her. Also want to give a shout out to my cousin, Katie Eckhart, who's thanked in the acknowledgements in here, who also is one of my first readers of almost all of my poems. So shout out to those people. I can't see everyone who's in the audience at the moment, so more people might have come in. I'm so grateful for the people who spoke into the life of this book and helped make these poems so much better than they would have been on their own. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so now I'm going to transition to reading some poems from my chapbook, which is called Put a Comma in Front of a Person. And I think it's a digital chapbook published by, it won the Harbor Review Editors Prize. And it's a beautiful digital chapbook featuring the artist of a Shanghainese artist named Bi Rong Rong, who graciously let me use her art on the cover. So I think we can put the link. Yeah, the link is in the chat if you want to click on it and be able to see the chapbook. That would be awesome. And thank you for that. I'm going to read a few poems from that. It's 10 poems. In 2022, I moved to China, and Shanghai had just lifted, literally a week before we landed, their historic lockdown. Shanghai was in lockdown for 4 months, and the residents couldn't leave their homes. And it was a very intense time to be planning on moving to Shanghai. And we had to serve a 11-day quarantine in a hotel, where we couldn't leave the room. All the hallways were covered in sheets. Anyway, so this book of poems is kind of about that experience of transitioning into a new place and in this sort of intense way. And I wrote a poem a day. I read a book of poems and wrote a poem a day while I was in quarantine with my daughter. My husband and sons had to be in a different room, so we were separated. And so that's why my daughter is in these poems a lot, because we had an intense time together. It was an intense time. Yeah, so I'm gonna read a few of those, and then yeah. Okay, so this one is called Aliens. Aliens, Shanghai, China, July 2022. A life is something you have to start. The daughter dances with suitcase, spins, asks the woman to look up. See her dance again, though the door is still locked and the hallway sprayed daily with bleach. Ask whatever questions you want. You won't get an answer now. She said today, I hate time. You asked why. She said, too many types. I wish we were all on the same one. Here it is morning, and somewhere else it's time to climb down from the cul-de-sac's trees. You are making coffee for the second time. Soon you will get up to pour box milk from the breakfast, tied in a double-layered plastic bag, left on the glass-topped table outside the quarantine hotel door. She refused the bow again today. Mommy, come, to the window to watch the man in the straw hat sweep leaves with a brush broom. After a descent of dragonflies, the suitcase has wheels, makes perfect orbits, creates, then loops the moon. Astronaut, physicist, great incomparable eye who calls all to see this little alien rolling back and forth and back. Okay, I'm going to read another short one from that chapbook. This one is after Solmaz Sharif. So a lot of the poems I was writing were kind of connected, ended up being sort of in conversation with the books of poems that I brought with me to read during that time. So I read Solmaz Sharif's book, and she has a poem called America. So I thought I'd try to write my own. Anyway, I feel like this is pretty appropriate. America, you broke any right to promise. All I am is your child, white mutt, dragged up through history. Your choss, your loss, a noose I can slip off at the last sec. You won, but now dead albatross. I left as a child, once and then again and again, and I never missed you. Not once, not now. Okay. How am I doing on time? I think I can read a few more. I'm going to read one that is kind of, I've never actually read the whole thing out loud, but I think it's going to be pretty fun to read out loud. I actually think this would be a great children's book. So if you know anybody who wants to turn a poem into a children's book, hook me up. Okay. So this is about being a mom. All right. So this is called On Feeling Seen by Animal Planet, or The Only Thing on Chinese TV is a show about puppies and old reruns of track and field. Wolf mother howls, turtle mother hides, pigeon mother pecks, octopus mother dies. Python mother smothers, parrot mother preens, beaver mother shelters, orangutan mother screams. Rat mother hoards, peacock mother struts, dog mother herds, worm mother has guts, penguin mother provides, mole mother saves, barnacle mother clings, honey badger mother craves, crow mother tarrows, cat mother cleans, seahorse mother is both, bear mother wants sleep, budgie mother tisks, cow mother drinks, fox mother plans, whale mother sings. Horse mother grooms, sloth mother chills, dragon mother smokes, stork mother has bills. Raccoon mother misbehaves, elephant mother keens, dolphin mother dotes, horsefly mother's mean. Chameleon mother rolls her eyes, leech mother overthinks. Squirrel mother remembers, harp seal mother leaves. Wolverine mother fights, lion mother teaches, crab mother pinches, tender, human mother creatures. Thanks, guys. Okay. All right, I'll read maybe one more from that. This is the last poem in that chapbook. So I'll read this one. And this one was actually written after we got out of quarantine. So this sort of serves as maybe a transition into like more of our normal life here in Shanghai. About 7 months after we moved to China and were able to get through the quarantine, almost all of China's kind of COVID restrictions and COVID regulations, which were very intense, were lifted very suddenly and overnight. A couple years, actually, it's about a couple years ago in January. So we were able to actually, you know, move more freely around and experience more of life here. So one of the things that we love to do is go to this little noodle shop that's in our neighborhood. It's super tiny, just a little hole in the wall. And the people that make, or the food is from Xinjiang province, which is kind of in northwest China. So this is a self-portrait. The restaurant is called Private Beef Noodles, And in Chinese, that's 四方牛肉面. So that's in the title. Self-portrait with a bowl of noodles in 四方牛肉面, Jinqiao, Shanghai. The little girl with the baby fat face and 3 pigtails holding a plastic yellow cup. Formica, peeling, sticks to contemplative forearms and elbows. Who else is at home in the corner shop next to a dentist, massage parlor, family mart? Kin with coolers of bottled iced tea, soy milks, refreshed by sounds of men watching game shows on phones, twinkle clink of Qingtao. Family owned, windows opaque, it's cold out. Nothing Latinate, Anglo, or Romanized has a name here, although some receive the hospitality of a heavy plastic menu with pictures of every dish. Wooden stools catch on worn linoleum, steam fogs, so the first bite is taken sightless. You aren't ready for the taste. Broth steeped for years, thick and more complex. A universe dotted with oil. Chopped cilantro, not everyone likes. Bok choy, green onions, chopsticks, spoon. I like myself with a little vinegar and chili oil, enough to make a brow sweat. I like welcoming you in through a glass door kicked open by the 3-year-old daughter of the place. We slide sideways between a foretop and next to people who ignore us. Scan, scroll, let's try something new. Egg with stewed tomatoes, 20 beef jiaozi spiced with cumin. Backbones jostled by Kuwaiti delivery boys, stacked paper bowls in plastic bags. I'm hungry. 太饿了. You better hope there is a stool available and you are ready to feast. Cool. Okay, I think I'll stop there. I think it's been about 25 minutes
That's perfect. We
for
kind of hit
now.
right at 8:30. Here, let me put myself back up here.
Cool, great.
So we'll transition a little bit to I'll ask you some questions and then maybe read two or three more poems and then
Okay,
open up to Q&A if that's
perfect.
good. Let me pop myself up there with you. Ah, hello. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your reading. Your poetry is beautiful. The visual, the imagery of your poems is wonderful, and I really appreciate that you had a chapbook to share with us online. I'm such a visual person. Being able to read it while you were reading it was great. I just wanted to start off with the basic question of just how do you find your way into your work? What does your writing practice look like? Especially as someone who's traveled a lot in your life and lived different places, maintaining a practice of anything can be difficult. So what does that look like for you?
Mm. Um, I it's when I was younger, I was sort of a like more of a fits and starts kind of writer. And in many ways, like my poetry practice is still very much like that. I tend to have like periods of time where I'm almost like manic in my what I'm generating. And then I need like periods of like rest where I have to sort of like put the poems away and not look at them for a long time. And then kind of be able to come back to the revision phase where there's a different kind of mania, that an obsession like that as you like, work and work and work and work on the poems. As I've gotten a little bit older, I feel like I understand my rhythm better in terms of how much I need like a constraint to help me generate new work. Um, so at this book, actually in 2016, I never had a daily, like I'm trying to write a poem every day. I started writing the poems in this book in 2016. And I decided that I would sign up for Tupelo Press's 30 for 30 project that they have where you can, sign up with a cohort of writers and then you write a poem a day and then you send them to someone and then literally they're publishing your poems every day on their site. So you have this sort of level of accountability. And I really wanted to do it. I wanted to discipline myself to do it. So I discovered very quickly I needed to be writing in form. So I sort of was experimenting a lot with sonnets and abecedarians and acrostics. I wrote a lot of acrostic poems during that time. And then I started resurrecting poems during that time too. So it was like I wanted to be able to have something every day, and being able to write in a form helped me be able to actually accomplish that goal. And so that was really transformative for me because I kind of previously would be sort of like, just sort of going more with the flow of my own inspiration. And then I would be sort of like, oh my gosh, it's been months since I wrote anything. And then I would get kind of down on myself. So, and then it was like, oh my gosh, now I have like a body of work. Cool. And now I can kind of grow from there and see how the stuff that I was writing after sort of was connected to these poems that were written during that period of time. So I find like constraints to be incredibly helpful. I also am very lucky that I'm a teacher, and one of the classes that I teach is creative writing. So I write alongside my students. Every prompt that I'm giving them, I'm trying to write as well with them during that time. So, 10 to 20 minutes is like a good window of time. We set a timer, we just try to get a draft out, say yes to ourselves, and so many of the poems in this book were written alongside my students at the university I was teaching at while I was living in Kentucky, and then my students that I've been teaching since. So, and then, yeah, so that's a huge part of my practice. Now I'm trying to also like just kind of write something every day, whether it's a poem or a little bit of prose or reflection or something, like just to be capturing language every day in some kind of way and documenting it. And then, I can flip through and, take it into kind of like draft one in my, typing it up. But everything starts in a notebook on, scribbled. For a long time also, I was like waking in the night, scribbling stuff on, a paper next to my bed. That hasn't happened in a while, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, that's a very sometimes for me too, of like
Yeah.
creation. Yeah, constraints is huge for me as well. If it comes to, if I can sign up for a class, I'll do it because that will help
Yes.
me get
Yes.
work
Yes.
done.
Absolutely.
So I'm
Absolutely.
glad you share that because it's especially hard, I think, as someone who maybe isn't a writer on a daily
Mhm.
basis or isn't involved in any of that kind of work in their job, that
Mhm.
having something that can have that deadline in your head, keep you going,
Mhm. Mhm.
to be with the
Yeah.
community of folks who are also doing the same thing.
Exactly. And I feel so grateful. Like, Sean is mentioning like Lex Pomo. And when I moved to Kentucky, I got connected with the Kentucky Women Writers conference. And that's how I met Carrie, who's, we kind of were in the same workshop the first year. And then we saw each other the next year and we're like, hey, I know you. And then she was like, you want to be in a poetry group with me? And I was like, oh my God, yes. So I think being able to find other people that you can meet with regularly to be exchanging poems is incredibly important. Like I do think it's important to have readers like in a very low stakes way,
Mhm.
like just somebody to hear it, like a poem is a voice speaking to someone. So being able to have an audience or an auditor that's a human is really important. And I think I try to reiterate that with my students all the time because I think they're terrified to share anything with anyone else, but there is such an incredible sense of gratification, even if your draft is really shitty, like to just read it out loud or share it with someone else and just to have a conversation. That's also that's something I really miss actually being here because um, I don't, I kind of like have lost some of that like regular just like exchange of poems, and you get really inspired by the work of your peers and your friends, and you cheering them on when they are getting their work is getting picked up by places, and it's really a powerful component of being a poet, I think. So
Being a poet isn't just writing alone in your room. It's also,
no, it's not. It's not at all. Yeah. Yeah.
to others. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about being a teacher and bringing, and can you I don't know much about what you teach in China and if that involves teaching poetry and what that looks like. Do you teach American poetry as well as Chinese poetry? Is there a specific form that you learned in China that is cool that you've been able to learn and share with them as well?
Yeah, I feel like I'm just really scratching the surface of I'm trying now to learn Chinese, and it is a very slow train that I'm on, let's be real. But I'm really proud of myself for being diligent at chipping away at it. It's to be like I turn 41 next month, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do as much as I can and on a regular basis because I want to have more access to the world around me and that includes poetry, that includes all of that kind of stuff. So I teach at an international school, which means, the students that are studying at our school are studying in English. Many of them are ethnically Chinese or Korean or other, Vietnamese or from different places all over the place. It's an international school. Um, so I try to teach a lot of work written by people who are multicultural or have blended like ethnic identities, linguistic identities. Um, and many of them are American poets just because that's they're Korean American or they're Chinese American. And I want them to see that there's ways to write about their own complex identities in the world. And so that's very important to me as I'm choosing texts and exposing them to. I want them to know, like, but many of our students do go to university in the US, like that's one of their goals. So I also want them to have kind of an understanding of that context as well, and kind of know what's happening right now in contemporary American poetics. Um, yeah. Uh, so I teach, currently I'm teaching I teach a bunch of stuff, but I teach drama. I teach like a sci-fi literature class to 11th and 12th graders, which is super fun. And then I teach creative writing. So only one of my classes is creative writing, but I have them do different like poet studies. We do poetry in the fall and prose in the spring. And I just try to model for them, create an environment in the class that really models like a kind of healthy poetic community, like what it means to be writing in community with other people. So I'm teaching them how to workshop. I'm teaching them we're practicing, having a daily writing practice, learning from these poets that are writing, doing a lot of imitation and, trying on their form or their style and experimenting as as my students discover their voices. So it's really fun. Yeah, it's super fun.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's very cool. Very cool to be a teacher. It's
So you
hard work,
mentioned,
but it's really cool.
and I think, for you specifically, that you teach at a school that's multicultural. They come from different backgrounds, and you yourself are multicultural
hmm
as well. I kind of
Yeah.
want to ask you what you use the term third culture, and to be honest, I
Mhm.
have not heard of that before until reading your bio. So could you kind
Yeah.
of explain what that means, and especially why that's important for you to share as a writer and an artist?
Mhm. So the term third culture or third culture kid, typically that's the way it's used, but because I'm not a kid anymore, I said culture person. Basically, it's the idea that you spend a significant part of your developmental years outside of the country of your passport country. So when I was 3, my parents moved to South Korea. So I grew up as an expatriate abroad my whole childhood until college. And then I went to college in the US. And then very quickly after I graduated college, I moved overseas again with my family. So I've also experienced like being a kind of third culture or expatriate adult. Um, and the idea is that, you sort of are not one thing or the other. You're sort of this third separate culture that's you have a connection to your the home your home country or your country of origin through maybe your parents, but a lot of times third culture kids feel like aliens in their own country, because when they go back to the States, or when they go back to where they're, maybe where their parents are from, they feel different than people who grew up in that place and have never left. So it changes something in you. And I consider it kind of like a little bit of a superpower, but there's a lot of grief
Mhm.
also, because you feel like you should be connected to this place, because it's like, I'm an American, or I have, I was born in Kentucky, but you don't have the kind of lived cultural experiences in that place. And a lot of times your family culture is somewhat impacted by that, because you grow up kind of outside of maybe the same kind of like familial community that maybe people have if they're, grow up down the street from their grandparents, or they're down the street from their aunties or uncles. Like, and depending how frequently you can return, that may be even more, like, there may even be more of a gap. So there's a lot of grief that's associated with that. But then also it's a massive strength. Like, third culture kids tend to be very adaptable. They are, people who are really good at observing and the world around them, and having a lot of empathy for all different kinds of people's experiences, because they themselves have been in situations where they've been an outsider and had to learn. So I think it's a lot of my work ever since I started writing poetry as a young, very, very young person, was exploring like a kind of identity crisis of sorts. Like, who am I? Where am I from? Where do I belong? Will I ever belong anywhere? Because, I'm a white woman. I was a white kid. Like, I was never going to be able to be Korean, even if I was fluent in Korean, even if I like, I was never going to be able to be actually assimilated into this place. But I have this deep, deep, deep love for Korea, and deep respect for Korea and Korean people. And all of my memories of my childhood, my formative childhood, are formed in that space, with those tastes, with the smells, with the Korean language. Like, when I was living in the US, anytime I would hear somebody speaking in Korean, I would just like start crying, because it was like sound, that's what home sounds like, and then it's like, why is this white lady crying? What the heck? This is weird, you know, because when people look at me in the, when I'm walking around in Kentucky, they're like, nobody's thinking like
Right.
anything is wrong, or it doesn't look weird at all. But then you just feel weird all the time, or like you don't really know what's going on. So that would be like it, third culture-ness in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, the assumptions that we walk around with every day, and not knowing where assuming where
Yeah.
people are from, and how that we think they're perfectly fine in a place where maybe they're actually internally kind of freaking out on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if you want to share, we can have time for maybe two more poems if you like, or we could
Okay.
go into Q&A with the folks that are chiming in, whatever you'd like to do.
Sure, sure, sure. Maybe I'll read okay, so maybe I'll read one poem that sort of, I think, like captures the that third cultureness. And this one really has some references to Kentucky and Georgia, where I lived before I moved to Korea when I was a little girl. In Korean culture, there's a kind of untranslatable word called Han that Korean people feel. It's a form of grief and deep, deep, deep anger that's sort of um, grounded in being an occupied country, and the sort of sadness of being a separated, having North Korea split from South Korea, and continuing to be occupied in many ways by the US government. So this is a Korean emotion. I'm not claiming to experience it, but the poem is titled Han, so I think it's important to uh, for the context of the poem. But it's sort of like a really intense feeling of grief, sorrow, and anger. Han, when she was a girl, She dragged her doll by the hair and scorched her feet on a hot slide. She crawled in the basement with a cottonmouth snake. Even her front tooth dangled from its root. When she was a girl, North Georgia and Kentucky couldn't tether. She was flown across an ocean she'd always know by its face pressed against the bosoms of clouds. When she was a girl with cicadas in her ears, the mountains were a skirt clutched in her fingers, and under her feet was the stink of gummy ginkgo fruit. On nighttime walks after scraping scorched rice from the bottom of a stone bowl in a city she could never own or fully know, the halogen lights of the GS-25 gave her face a deadly glow. She prayed to the patron saint of 10 won coins, blessed herself with plastic dippers full of cold mountain water. Pink lotus lanterns lined the path back down the mountain behind her home. In every self-portrait, her eyes list up like roof tiles. With crayons, she colored her blue eyes black. The words she needed, she didn't know. She couldn't give back. She yearned to let loose from the mountain a deep mourning, Yah-ho, and release what must have been animated by the Han she'd breathed in when she was a girl. Cool. So that's that.
Mm, wonderful. All
Thank
right.
you.
So we got some questions popping in. I guess I'll go ahead
Okay, cool.
and read them. All right. Carissa asked, what is the hardest form you've learned to write?
Okay, so I actually thought sonnets were going to be really hard, but then I love a sonnet that I don't find sonnets particularly hard. The hardest form I have written is I actually, okay, wait, it's maybe a tie between Pantoum and a ghazal. I wrote a ghazal for my aunt's like retirement, and it was so hard, but it was so gratifying when I finished the poem, and I knew the poem had to be in that form. So I was like, I'm gonna just persevere with this thing, but I found it incredibly difficult. But yeah, the Pantoum is also really hard, I find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never heard of a guzzle.
Yeah. Yeah, so a ghazal
Gonna
is
Google that.
yeah, a Persian form.
Okay.
It's very cool, and you can find very, very, very good examples. I'll put it's spelled like this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would not have typed that in.
Yes. So definitely Google it and try. It's very
Wow.
cool. Natasha Trethewey has an amazing ghazal that is pretty widely anthologized, and there's so many good examples of them. But it involves repeating, like a repeating word. Um, I worked so the poem was about my aunt. So the question from Clay is, did you work your name into the last couplet? Because the poet's name has to appear in the last couplet. It's a poem that's in couplets. And because it was a poem for my aunt and uncle, I worked their name into the end of the last couplet. So that was, yeah, yes. That one is very difficult though, for sure. Yeah, sestinas are also incredibly hard. Um, Carissa said, I agree. I would upvote that one. It's very difficult. Yeah.
All right. We got another question. What kind of language spaces have inspired your vocabulary, even as a third culture person? And also an ad, I guess, is kind of related, or any favorite Kentucky authors?
Oh, I have so many favorite Kentucky authors. I mean, I always say this, but Kentucky is truly a wealth of poets, truly, truly a wealth of poets. Two of my favorite Kentucky writers are Carrie Green, who's in this meeting, and Jeremy Payton, whose work you should definitely look up. I'll put their names in the chat. Um, They are my poet friends and I love them. Also, I was in a poetry group of Louisville poets too. Louisville has so many incredible poets, Christy Maxwell, Jessica Farquhar, um, uh, Joshua Adams, so many people. And Joy Priest. I love the work of Joy Priest. She's incredible. Um, who else? Let's see. Um, Ada Limon, obviously, she's amazing. Um, yeah, Kentucky just has so many poets that are doing such incredible things. But some of my first poets, Kentucky poets that I fell in love with were Wendell Berry. He's incredible, like kind of was a gateway poet for me into poetry. And I love his work so much. And also Frank X. Walker. His was one of the first books I ever read, full books of poetry I ever read. And he's an incredible poet as well. So wherever I live, I try to read as much local, poets by people from that place or that are living in that place as possible. I'm also very, very inspired by like poets that, are writing from interesting intersections of identity. So poets like Franny Choi, who's a Korean American poet, um, uh, and so many others. Oh my gosh, Tiana Nobio, we were just talking about her. She's a poet from New Orleans. Um, yeah, I could keep going on and on, but yeah,
Taylor.
I'm always inspired by the language spaces of the places where I live. Actually, the title of my chapbook, Put a Comma in Front of a Person, was actually like a translation of a uh, WeChat text message that was sent in the group chat we were forced to be in the quarantine. And so it was a Chinese, there were all these people in the chat that were Chinese people that were also in quarantine, and they were getting very upset about what they were told was the amount of time they would have to stay in quarantine and what was in reality. And so, as a foreigner who's new to the country, WeChat has a function where you can you can like hold it down the chat and it will like translate. So I was just like translating. We would wake up to just like 45 like messages in the chat, and I was translating all of them. And that was one of the translations of what somebody had put in the chat. And I was like, this is incredible. I was screenshotting everything because there's so much poetry in that, in mistranslations and translations. And I just thought it was so interesting. So I love stuff like that, like people sort of phrases, words and languages that are kind of distinctive to like a family, the sort of shared language that you develop inside of a family, shorthand for things, idioms. I always mess up idioms because I grew up in Korea, so I can never remember them the right way, the English ones. But I think that's interesting, like, so
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff.
accidentally flip-flopped a popular sentence or idiom, but you can
Yeah,
poetry with that within that.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No, I like to say I think I'm a good writer because I'm a terrible speaker. Like, because it all comes out garbled sometimes, but that helps me as a writer find new ways to put the words
Yeah,
in different.
exactly.
I
Well,
turn
in
that
English,
into my own superpower, or try at least.
yeah, exactly. English is so malleable. I'm incredibly inspired by my English language learner students and the poetry that they write because oftentimes they don't have the same kind of filters or like inhibitions in their English. Like they consider it like, oh, I can't write poetry. Like my English isn't good enough. And I'm like, actually, you're writing the most interesting kind of poetry because you're sort of just putting stuff together that a native English speaker would never think to do because it's just like wrong or it sounds weird, but actually it makes for like incredible poetry. So I love working with people who are functioning on different languages because I think it enriches what I'm writing and also the permission I can give myself to sort of break English um, in service of the poem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do we have any more? I think we do. Um, did I skip one? I don't think so. Okay. Uh, curious about what you feel like you've learned from the resurrection form. Did you see the
Mhm.
original differently, or did you sort of open up a reflection on your form and line as you came back to them?
Yeah, so the resurrection also sort of started like whenever I would feel stuck, like I don't know, I want to write something, but I don't know what to write. It sort of is like a way to sort of already have language at your fingertips that you can manipulate. And um, just as a generative activity, not even really trying to necessarily turn it into something else. And so it helped me to first of all just see how many different things you can do with like the same set of words or the same 50 words from this little bitty poem. I can like turn them into something um brand new that still feels very fresh. It doesn't feel like it's just a reiteration of the original. It is its own thing. It is new. um so I think it helped me understand syntax better. It also helped me understand um the sort of inventiveness with which you can turn a noun into a verb and put things together in an interesting way to still kind of capture an emotion or a feeling or a sensation. And it's interesting to see like the relationship that's between the two because they are related. Like you see echoes of the same words obviously in each one, but each one is sort of also meant to stand by itself and not necessarily have to be read in tandem with the other one. Um, so I I found it very illuminating. I didn't often go back and like I didn't often edit. Like typically the first poem was finished before I would try to resurrect it to something else. So the second one, the resurrected one is the one that just got fiddled with, over and over or sort of reborn into this new thing. Um but the first one didn't I didn't normally like go back and revisit it. And it's a form that can be really easily used, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling, like, oh, I want to write something, but I don't know what to do. It's like, just find a poem. I would start with a shorter one if I were you, and then just turn it into a word pool. Like I would just like separate all the line breaks out and just literally turn it into kind of like a word pool and then copy paste
I would
words
agree.
out. So I would remember what I already used, because otherwise I would lose track of what I'd already used. So, um, and actually I have a chapbook of poems that use that form. It's sort of a reassemblage, a chapbook, using essays. The original source text are all essays from the New York Times Mother's Day, like 2020, they published this series of famous women writing Mother's Day essays, these short sort of like essayettes. And I have a series of poems that I've written as sort of reassemblages built out of language from those essayettes. And then the poem has the same title as the essay. Um, Currently unpublished chapbook, but it's circulate. Some poems are circulating out in the world from that, but that's another body of work that I've written recently.
Awesome. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
the idea of the resurrection form.
Mhm.
Definitely going to use that.
Yeah, try it.
I just have so many poems that I haven't looked at in a while, but also don't feel like are enough. But
Yes,
I'd like a little line or two too much to just toss it away. So
yes,
that's a great way to
yeah,
just kind of also be kinder to yourself as a
for
poet and
sure.
like, hey, I already have some good stuff here, but I just need a little break it down a little bit and cut and
Mhm.
rework it in another way. It's great. I love it.
Exactly.
All right, do we have any more questions? We hit the 9 p.m. mark. I think wow, we
Mhm.
really filled our time with poetry and for Q&A. We it's been great. Um,
Thank you so much.
do you have anything else you'd like to say or close out with? Christina, thank you so much for
Uh, I
reading.
just want to say thank you to everybody for coming. I appreciate being able to share some work that I haven't really been able to do at any readings. So it's fun to be able to share it with an audience. I appreciate so much the Kentucky State Poetry Society, and Danny Quintos, who invited me to participate in this. Thank you, Jessica, for hosting. And thank you to all of you who came and showed up on this cold evening in the United States of America. I appreciate you. Yeah, thanks. And I put the link for the book in the chat too. If you want to buy it, it's on Bookshop. That's where I would recommend buying it if you want to. And then, yeah, Katie's modeling it there. Thank you. And I just appreciate, thank you for sharing poetry, and keep writing your own poetry and sharing it with the world.
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you all
Thank
Yeah,
so
thank
you.
you.
for
This is
coming.
great. Yeah, thank you
Thank you
very
so much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Right,
I don't want to dance. Thank you. This is great.
round two, round two.
Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you very much. Loved your
Thank you.
poetry.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Catherine.
Now I know I'm not a poet, but it's all right.
Oh,
No, you are. You absolutely are. You absolutely are. Absolutely.
she's pulling her leg. She is a poet. She just silly.
I am, but not. I mean, this was really good. Beautiful, beautiful
Thank
poetry.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye,
I have to go
everybody.
teach my next class. So
Have
Bye.
the rest of
I
your day.
gotta sign off. Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.